Ethan Wolfe believed in order, not just the kind that kept his apartment spotless, but the kind that structured a man's life like an unshakable foundation. He woke up at 5 every morning, performed a rigorous workout in his living room, and brewed his coffee in silence. The world outside might be chaotic, filled with noise, pointless distractions, and people drowning in the trends of the day, but not Ethan. He didn't bother with friendships, social media, or idle chatter. His time was spent efficiently, working on his online business in the evenings, reading philosophy, and maintaining the self-reliance he valued above all else. His life was predictable, quiet, just the way he liked it, until she moved in. Ethan was returning from a run one morning when he first saw her. Lena Carter, standing outside the apartment door opposite his, dressed in ripped jeans, a crop top that declared the future as female, and wearing thick-framed glasses. She was talking animatedly to the landlord while directing movers carrying boxes into her apartment. He didn't give her a second thought, until later that evening when the noise started, the pounding of furniture being dragged across the floor, laughter, shouting, some ridiculous indie music shaking the walls. Ethan sat at his desk, gripping the edges of his laptop, trying to focus on his work. He exhaled slowly, willing himself to ignore it. Then came the worst part. A chant, dozens of voices chanting in unison. He recognized it instantly. Feminist slogans. His new neighbor had turned her apartment into a gathering for activists. Ethan didn't believe in interfering with other people's lives. But when their chaos intruded on his space, that was another matter. He stood, grabbed a hoodie, and stepped out into the hallway. The door to her apartment was slightly ajar, revealing a room filled with young women, some holding signs, others recording something on their phones. Lena was at the center of it all, standing on a chair, rallying them with fiery words about systemic oppression. Ethan knocked on the doorframe, crossing his arms. The room quieted slightly as Lena turned, eyeing him with casual defiance. "Yes?" she said, her tone clipped. "Can you keep it down?" His voice was calm, but firm. "Some of us have work to do." Lena smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile people wore when they were about to start a fight. "I'm sorry," she said, clearly not sorry at all. "Didn't realize my right to express myself ended at your comfort level." Ethan didn't rise to the bait. It's not about expression. It's about basic courtesy. One of the women behind her scoffed. "Oh, here we go," she muttered. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Don't seem like the neighborly type, so I'll keep this simple. I live here now. We do discussions, meetings, and sometimes community organizing. If that bothers you, well," she shrugged, "that's not really my problem." Ethan met her gaze without blinking. "So that's how it is." "That's how it is." He gave a slow nod. "Noted." Then, without another word, he turned and walked back into his apartment, shutting the door behind him. The next morning, Ethan found a note slipped under his door. "If noise is an issue, you should invest in some headphones. Just a thought. Lena." He smirked, crumpling it and tossing it aside. The passive-aggressive war had begun. Ethan wasn't the type to let things fester. If there was a problem, he confronted it directly, efficiently, and without drama. But Lena Carter? She lived for drama. Over the next few days, she escalated their passive-aggressive battle with the kind of smug, performative energy he found exhausting. More notes slid under his door, always sarcastic, always taunting. "Sorry if my existence disturbs your monk-like silence. L, ever consider earplugs? Or do those disrupt your Sigma grind set? L, maybe if you tried socializing, people wouldn't seem so loud to you. L, Ethan ignored her, but she didn't stop at notes. She cranked up her music just a little louder every night, always right when he sat down to work. When she had guests over, she left her door open just enough for their conversations to spill into the hallway, always about social justice, oppression, toxic masculinity. It was bait, and Ethan refused to take it. But then Lena upped the ante. One evening, as Ethan returned from the gym, he found a group waiting for him in the hallway. Lena and 3 of her friends, all standing just outside her door. "Ah, here he is," Lena announced, flashing him a too wide grin. Ethan slowed his steps but didn't acknowledge her beyond a glance. He wasn't playing whatever game this was. "Ladies, meet my neighbor," Lena continued. "A man of mystery who doesn't believe in basic community engagement. And also," she placed a hand to her chest in mock sincerity, "a big fan of peace and quiet." One of her friends, a pink-haired woman in a thrifted blazer, laughed. "So he's a shut-in?" Ethan kept his expression blank. Another woman, taller, wearing a band tee, smirked. "More like one of those grind set guys, I bet. What's the morning routine? Cold showers? Podcast about alpha energy?" Lena grinned, clearly enjoyed herself. "Come on, Ethan. Say something. You've been so quiet." Ethan met her gaze. "Are you done?" The teasing energy in the air faltered just slightly. Lena's smirk remained, but her eyes flickered with something else. Annoyance? Discomfort? "Touchy," she said lightly. "Guess we'll leave you to your deep thoughts." Ethan stepped past them, unlocked his door, and shut it. As he set his gym bag down, he exhaled slowly. Lena wanted a reaction. He wasn't going to give her one. But he was going to end this. The next day, Ethan got to work. He didn't just tolerate the noise. He studied it. He noted the time she played music, the moments she hosted meetings, the patterns of her activism. He researched local noise ordinances, tenant rights, and property regulations. And then he struck. First, he filed an official complaint with the landlord. He didn't go to them whining about noise. He compiled evidence. He cited exact times, decibel levels, and the impact on his ability to work. He pointed out that Lena was using her apartment for organized gatherings, which violated the lease's guidelines about disturbances. Then he made a few strategic adjustments to his own habits. If Lena thought she could outlast him, she was in for a surprise. The next week, she got her first notice from management, a warning. Ethan saw her in the hallway as she read the letter, her eyebrows furrowing. When she noticed him, she narrowed her eyes. "Cute," she said. "Really mature." He didn't stop walking. "Basic courtesy," he said simply. She huffed. "You reported me? You broke the lease." Lena scoffed, shaking her head. "Wow." The silent, brooding guy tattled. Ethan shrugged. "I believe in solutions." She glared at him as he disappeared into his apartment. Lena fought back. She turned her activist voice against him, telling neighbors he was a hostile presence, painting him as the uptight, controlling guy trying to silence her. But Ethan had something Lena didn't: patience. When she hosted her next activist meeting, management intervened before he even had to lift a finger. When she tried to rally others against him, she quickly learned that most people in the building didn't actually appreciate the noise. And when she tried to confront him one-on-one, Ethan did what he did best: remained unshaken. "You enjoy this, don't you?" She snapped at him one evening, blocking his path in the hallway. He regarded her with calm detachment. "I enjoy order." Lena folded her arms. "This isn't about noise. You just don't like people like me." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "You assume too much." "I know you," she shot back. "Guys like you, silent, self-important, think you're better than everyone. You think the world is some meritocracy where you've earned your piece while the rest of us are just making noise for the sake of it." He let the words hang between them before replying. "The world is noise. The difference is I don't beg it to listen." Lena opened her mouth, then shut it. For the first time, she had no quick retort. She stormed back into her apartment, slamming the door behind her. Ethan exhaled. The war wasn't over, but the cracks were showing. Lena Carter was not used to losing. She had spent years challenging, debating, and dismantling opposition with sharp words and unwavering conviction. She had marched, protested, and written scathing articles that went viral. She had spoken on podcasts, debated professors, and had even been blocked by several high-profile politicians on social media. She was not, under any circumstances, going to let some stone-faced loner with a superiority complex silence her. And yet, she was losing, not because Ethan Wolfe was louder, not because he had rallied anyone against her, but because he did the one thing she hadn't anticipated. He didn't engage. No matter how much he provoked, mocked, or tried to get under his skin, he remained unreadable, immovable, an impenetrable wall. Worse, he was winning with the kind of efficiency that made her stomach twist. Her first warning had been bad enough. The second was humiliating. Management had informed her, in no uncertain terms, that she was in violation of multiple clauses in her lease. The meetings had to stop, the gatherings had to be held elsewhere, and any further noise complaints could lead to eviction. Lena had argued, of course. She had gone full activist mode, throwing out terms like freedom of assembly and tenants' rights. But the reality was simple. This wasn't a government issue. It was a lease issue. And legally, she was in the wrong. She had no choice but to comply, and she hated it. Her gathering stopped, her music volume dropped, and her once vocal presence in the building faded. Ethan noticed. Not that he cared, but he noticed. Lena still tried to push back, through passive-aggressive glares, overly dramatic sighs when passing in the hallway, and the occasional snarky remark muttered under her breath. But she had lost her stage, and she knew it. Ethan, however, was not one to celebrate victories. He didn't need Lena to suffer defeat. He just needed peace. And yet, something about her silence felt off. Not that he missed the arguments, but something in her eyes had changed. The fire, the defiance. It wasn't just aimed at him anymore. It was turning inward. One evening, Ethan left his apartment to grab something from the store. As he stepped into the hallway, he nearly bumped into Lena. She wasn't looking at him. She was sitting against her door, legs stretched out, her phone dimly lit in her hand. She looked exhausted, not in the way someone looks after a long day, in the way someone looks when they don't know where to go next. For a moment, Ethan considered walking past her, but something about the way she was staring at nothing made him pause. She hadn't even noticed him. That was new. He wasn't one for unnecessary conversations, but his instinct for observation overrode his preference for silence. "You okay?" he asked, his voice even. Lena blinked, as if pulled from a trance. Then she looked up at him, frowning. "Wow, the great Ethan Wolfe, asking about my well-being?" Her voice was sharp, but there was no real bite behind it. Ethan didn't react. Lena exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I'm fine," she muttered. But even she didn't sound convinced. He could have left it at that. Should have, maybe. Instead, he said, "You don't look fine." Lena let out a humorless laugh. "What, you care now?" Ethan shrugged. "I don't like distractions." She scoffed. "Right. Of course. Wouldn't want my personal crisis interrupting your zen." Silence settled between them. Then, without looking at him, she murmured, "I lost my job today." Ethan didn't react outwardly, but he understood the weight behind those words. Lena had built her entire identity around her work. Writing, speaking, activism. It wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. "What happened?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. She let out a slow breath. "My articles got flagged for misrepresentation." Her fingers tightened around her phone. "Apparently, some people didn't like what I wrote. Sponsors pulled back. The editor caved. I got cut." Ethan nodded slightly. He wasn't surprised. Lena was bold, too bold at times. In an era where even allies turn on each other over minor ideological shifts, it wasn't hard to imagine how she'd made enemies. "I'll fight it," she said quickly, as if trying to convince herself. "They can't just erase me. I have connections. I have..." She stopped, swallowed, and then, finally, admitted the truth. "I have nothing." The words hung between them. For the first time since she moved in, she wasn't speaking at him. She was just speaking. Ethan studied her for a moment. Lena Carter was many things, loud, stubborn, infuriating. But she was also, at her core, someone who believed in what she fought for. And now, that fight was crumbling beneath her feet. "Sounds like a problem," he said, voice measured. Lena snorted, shaking her head. "No kidding." Silence again. Then, to his own surprise, Ethan said, "So what's next?" Lena hesitated, and for the first time, she admitted, "I don't know." For the first time, Ethan saw Lena Carter for what she truly was. Not an enemy, not a problem, Just a person, standing on the edge of something she didn't know how to handle. And whether he liked it or not, he had a front row seat to watch her fall. Lena Carter was unraveling. The firebrand, the unshakable voice of the movement, the woman who thrived in confrontation. She was crumbling before Ethan Wolfe's eyes. She didn't talk as much anymore. She still sent the occasional glare his way, but it was hollow, lacking the sharpness it once had. The activist meetings had stopped entirely. The music was gone. Even the passive-aggressive notes under his door had ceased. The world she had built, her identity, her career, her purpose, had collapsed, and for the first time, Lena was adrift. Ethan watched it all unfold, not with satisfaction, but with a quiet inevitability. Because people like Lena, people who built their existence on external validation, on movements, on causes, they never lasted when the tide turned against them. And now, Lena Carter was drowning. The final blow came a week later. A few neighbors murmured about it before Ethan heard it directly from her. She was leaving. Ethan found her in the hallway, taping a notice to vacate on her door. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, arms crossed, observing. Lena felt his presence and let out a dry chuckle. "Go ahead," she muttered. "Say it." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Say what?" She turned to face him fully, expression tired, but still carrying a flicker of old defiance. "That you won. That I got what I deserved. That my activist nonsense finally caught up with me." Ethan remained impassive. "I don't need to say anything." Lena clenched her jaw. "Yeah, because you already know it." She exhaled, looking away. "I'm moving next week. I found a cheaper place across town. Not as nice as this one, but I guess I should be grateful I could even find a spot at all." Ethan said nothing. Lena shook her head. "You think I'm pathetic, don't you?" For the first time, Ethan actually considered the question. Pathetic? No. Misguided? Absolutely. Lena had built her entire identity around a fight that had no real end. She had spent years battling shadows, forcing ideological purity tests on everyone around her, and believing she was immune to the very forces she wielded against others. And now, she had been cast out, rejected by the very system she thought she controlled. It wasn't pathetic. It was predictable. "You spent so much time trying to make the world listen," Ethan said finally, his voice calm. "And now that it isn't, you don't know who you are." Lena flinched, because it was true. Her fight had been her entire life. And now, stripped of it, she was no one. She was silent for a long time before finally whispering, "I thought I was making a difference." Ethan didn't respond, because in the end, it didn't matter what she thought. Reality had spoken, and Lena Carter had lost. The day she left, there was no grand farewell, no speeches, no last stand, just silence. Ethan saw her one last time as she carried the final box to her car. She paused before getting in, turning to face him. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something. Maybe one last jab. Maybe one last attempt to reclaim the upper hand. But she didn't. She just sighed, gave him one last unreadable look, and got in the car. Ethan watched as she drove away. Then he turned back inside, shut his door, and returned to his world of quiet. The war was over. And Ethan Wolfe remained, unshaken, undefeated, and exactly as he had always been.